Good evening. We're going to get going, so if board members can join us up here on the dais, and the audience can please have a seat. All right. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our board meeting for the month of April. And I'll call the meeting to order at 7:06 p.m. We'll start with a roll call, please.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Chair Abekoga?
Here.
Vice Chair Miller?
Here.
Alternate Director Lawler?
Here.
Alternate Director Rennie?
Here.
Director Smith?
Here.
Director Sinks?
Here.
Director Corrigan?
Yes, here.
Director Gibbons?
Here.
Director Bruins?
Here.
Director Martinez Beltran?
Here.
Director Tovar?
Here.
Thank you. I'll note Director Ellenberg and Director Nunez are currently absent.
Great. Thank you. We will move on to public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. The public may provide comments on any item not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Any members of the public, any cards? No? All right, then we'll move on. So we wanted to start this meeting this evening with a short video highlighting our second year. This is our second anniversary of carbon-free energy service to our communities. So if you can take a look at your screens.
Realizing our initial goal of producing carbon-free electricity in our base rate, that is a rate lower than customers would otherwise pay to PG&E, is a major accomplishment. And we continue to do that to this day. Looking at other programs and sourcing of electricity, I think we are becoming one of the more innovative electricity providers in the state. And together with our sister organizations, community choice energy agencies across the state, we're leading the way to a carbon-free future.
Well, I'm really excited to say we have 3 new projects. We have 2 solar that are being built in California and 1 wind project in New Mexico. And I'm really proud that we're leading the charge on building these projects. The key part is actually the storage that's going to go with the solar. So with the storage, we can store the energy of the sun during the day and then pull it back out of the battery in the evening when people are coming home. And so they're still effectively using the energy from the sun, even though the sun has gone down.
I value carbon-free electricity because I care about our future, the future of our planet, and the quality of life for future generations to come.
One of the mandates from the state is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. This does 20% off the top right away. So we're already partway there to meeting our emissions standards.
I want to be able to tell my daughter when she grows up what we did for our climate.
So I think anything we can do to improve the environment is well worth what we do here. I think it's everybody's responsibility to look at the world and realize, you know, we're going to have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and hopefully we can realize that we need to take care of what we have as the population of the world expands.
LinkedIn has a public commitment to be on a path to operating with 100% clean renewable energy. Silicon Valley Clean Energy's Green Prime 100% renewable energy helps us make huge progress toward those goals. And it also helps us support the climate strategies of the cities of Sunnyvale and Mountain View, where our offices are located.
SVCE, when it was first formed, had a number of critics and people who were really concerned about what this upstart company was and the promises we were making and the things we said we were going to be able to do. As a result, it became really our daily imperative to prove that we were not only able to achieve what we said we were going to do, but do it in a way where customers really felt good about being part of this bigger movement. And the work that SVCE is doing is truly going to leave a better world for our kids.
Well, that's a really well-made video, and I just want to thank staff and our board. Congratulations to all of us, including the public, the members of the public who were there or who were the ones pushing us to do this in the beginning. I think we've really achieved a lot in 2 years. I'm happy to say in Mountain View, we're actually seeing our emissions going up due to our growth, but in this last year, because of SVCE, we finally have seen a drop, and so we can really, see that this is making a difference. So congratulations and thank you to all of you for your hard work the last 2 years. And to commemorate this special occasion, we are honored to have Yvonne Chow, who's a district representative from the Office of State Senator Jim Bell, who has a resolution for us.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Yvonne Chow, and I'm from Senator Bell's office, and I'm going to go ahead and just read the last part. Senator Bell commends the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority for the outstanding contributions it has made to communities throughout Santa Clara County through its Community Choice Energy Program, and extends sincere best wishes for the continued growth and success of its clean energy projects in the years to come. Congratulations.
Margaret, could we have the board also come and take another photograph?
All right, we'll now move on to business. We'll start off with the consent calendar. Are there any items, any members wishing to pull any items from the consent calendar? Any members of the public wishing to pull items? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Board Member Bruins and and second by Board Member Tovar. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to the regular calendar. And we start off with our CEO report. And our CEO, Girish Balachandran.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Abhikoga, members of the board. So a highlight for us in this last month was we had our lobby day with CalCCA. So we were up in Sacramento last week. We met with all members of our delegation, plus many other members. the Assembly and Senate. I'm going to ask Hillary Staver to start coming up to the podium so she can give you an update on legislative and regulatory affairs.
Good evening, directors. Hillary Staver, Regulatory and Legislative Affairs. So as Girish mentioned, last week on Wednesday, we had CalCCA's annual lobby day in Sacramento. So there were kind of two tracks of activity happening there. CalCCA arranged a series of meetings with leaders in the Senate and Assembly who are going to be key decision makers on energy legislation this session. And then we also had individual CCAs making the rounds to the offices of their delegation, the legislators that represent their service territories. And there's some overlap between those two categories in some cases. So we had a delegation present in both of those threads. It was Director Nunez, myself, Girish, and also our lobbyists from Aaron Reed and Associates in Sacramento. So there are a couple things that we were working on in those meetings. For our legislators, we've spoken with them in the district offices since last session in the fall and early winter this year, but this was the first time that we've been to Sacramento. So it functions first as kind of a check-in, and then as a sort of a scene setter, because a lot of our legislators are not currently on committees where they're facing an imminent vote on any of the main energy bills that we're looking at, but they will be in about a month when those come to the floor. So there are a lot of big events, as you know, going on in the energy space this year, and depending on the degree of closeness that each legislator follows those they may benefit from a refresher on just what's going on. So we talked to all 10 of our offices, including the office of Assemblymember Robert Rivas, who is our newest legislator, taking over from Ana Caballero, who is now in the Senate. So we talked about kind of in broad strokes what's going on, pointed out some key bills to them, and then in the CalCCA meetings, those were focused on some of what have emerged as the big energy reform bills this year. So the two that we're looking at right now in the spotlight are AB 56 by Assemblymember Garcia and SB 350 by Senator Hertzberg on the Senate side. And both of those are, I would say, very definitely unfinished, but the authors have made it very clear that they are focused on some type of central buyer for reliability and or renewable portfolio standard resources. So right now we're working actively with both of those offices, trying to get those bills to a place where we can support them. And in the meantime, we're working with our delegation to make sure that they are primed for making a decision on those bills in whatever form they are in when they hit the floor and are ready to be voted on by all legislators. So we were really glad to be able to get some face time with all 10 of our offices. We're going to be following up with conversations with them in pretty short order, and also working with the main bill authors as long as we can. So I'll stop there first. Are there any questions on the legislative side? All right. And I'll say, even though he's not present at the moment, thank you to Director Nunez for accompanying us on that. Then moving over to the regulatory side, we're dealing with a lot of the exact same issues. So you may remember the concept of a central buyer is one that we've been talking about already for almost a year in the resource adequacy proceeding. So on that one, that continues to move forward on two different tracks at the same time. So we're working in track 3. That was originally kind of a catch-all for this proceeding. The main issue that we're pushing there is trying to make sure that now that we've instituted a multi-year requirement, a 3-year requirement for local resource adequacy, that those products are being offered on the market in a timely fashion so that we can meet our compliance requirements. Then track 2, that is the one that was queued up in February as being about a 6-month track where we would have an in-depth conversation about central buyer around the same time the legislature is. And that has not moved forward. We're waiting on a schedule from the commission, working on developing our ideas, but we're expecting we may have to move quickly on that when they release the schedule, because it may interact with some tight deadlines on the legislative side. So that's resource adequacy. I would say, though, the biggest new piece of information we got on the regulatory side this month was in the integrated resource planning proceeding. So on March 18th, we got a proposed decision. We'd been expecting this for a while. It's the decision that's going to end the first cycle of integrated resource planning in California, hopefully to be followed thereafter by the beginning of the next one. And there was a curveball in this, in that 17 of the 21 CCA integrated resource plans, including ours, were not certified. However, it's for a very specific reason, which is that they wanted to see more quantitative modeling of the impacts on NOx and particulate emissions from serving our load, which is a somewhat auxiliary question to the GHG modeling that we spent the vast majority of the time working with the Commission on last year. So it was an interesting decision, but nonetheless, it's fairly easy to fix. So there's a whole group of us that are in the same situation on this, and we are going to do some additional modeling. They've given us until June to file an advice letter, refile a slightly updated version of the IRP. So on that, unexpected, but we should be moving forward to solve that pretty quickly. The other piece of the proposed decision, which I think is the more significant one from a policy perspective, is they did not close the proceeding. Instead, they opened up an additional track to talk about procurement, potentially central procurement. And so what we're seeing now is essentially a repeat of the conversation we're having in the resource adequacy proceeding and in Sacramento now, but for renewable resources. So this is something that we don't have much more information on yet, because they can't start scheduling that and having those conversations until this proposed decision goes through. But what we've heard from stakeholders, from commissioners, is it is very likely that this portion of the proposed decision will remain and will be approved by the Commission. So we've tried to make it very clear that this is the first round of integrated resource planning. This was designed all along to be kind of a test run for this process. And what we should be doing is moving forward into the next iteration so we can refine our modeling and improve the process overall. But we may end up looking at having 2 integrated resource planning tracks, proceedings running later this year, because they need to start the 2019-2020 cycle in order to have LSEs file their next IRP in 2020 on time. So, so I'll stop there for a moment. Any questions on that? And then I have one more item. Rod?
So I'm wondering if the bureaucrats at the CPUC think that our NOx emissions are coming from the wind or the water or the solar, and also, do they think that our wind power is causing cancer?
Perhaps we'll have to address that in our filing in June. It's, this was one of the least talked about pieces in the integrated resource plan, and I think there was just not a lot of clear direction on the level of detail the Commission was looking for on this. So we'll rectify it pretty quickly. Anything else?
Do we imagine that there are NOx emissions from any of the electricity sources that we procure, other than system power?
This is one of the things that we're trying to clarify with Commission staff, because we're trying to figure out if there are other sources that they had in mind that were not captured in the existing templates and calculator that we filled out for the IRP. Because as you pointed out.
Yes, thank you. Sounds like a little bit of deliberate obfuscation by the political body. I mean, this is bizarre and inexcusable to dump this on us at this stage of the game. I mean,
I think you make a very good point in that we should not let this distract us from the fact that they have opened up a new track where they're basically considering central procurement for renewable resources in order, under the guise of meeting state policy goals. And that's something, that is a very significant policy step, and that is something that I think we should be focusing on more than this.
So, as we know, we're all politicians here, and we know lots of politicians, including congressional politicians. Should we be having letters written? Should we get a template and some letters out to every city council and to our congressional delegates to address either or both, whatever? Because, I mean, this is I mean, they keep throwing it at us.
I think that there will definitely, in the next couple months, be a place for some public action on this issue of central procurement of reliability and or renewable resources. I think at the moment, well, the short answer is yes, and we should talk in further detail. Because these issues are being talked about in multiple forums right now. I think we want to make sure that we figure out where the most effective place to do that advocacy will be.
Okay, but don't forget, we can go to the congressional level as well. On the, whatever we need, we can go to.
Now they have proof positive that the vast majority of the CCAs can't produce the correct compliance requirements. We can't meet the requirements. This is. You say it's trivial. This was strategically bad.
It was strategic.
This was intended to make the whole industry look bad.
Yep, absolutely.
They're not mutually exclusive.
No. Yeah, less so. And apologize, I'm wearing sunglasses only because the light up here, I had surgery on my eye and it's a little sensitive to the light, so apologize for that.
Liz, if I may sort of, I think Ms. Tibbins makes a great point here where we should all go back to our own councils and sort of have this discussion as well. I understand maybe, I don't think it's too soon. I think what we need to do is start having this dialogue with our own city councils and see what we can do as different cities and sort of with this issue here.
Well, I would be glad to follow up on this if you're interested in taking some action.
And I'll add, based on prompting from a couple of smart people to my left. No, both of you, that we ought to have a Ledge Committee meeting very soon to talk about our response to the stupidity of this, quite frankly. And, what's been going on here with the CPUC? I don't understand. It's true that that central buyer is a big threat, and that's happening both in the legislature and the CPUC, but we need to call them on this kind of nonsense, in my opinion. But why don't we have a good Ledge Committee meeting, and we will bring a strategy back to the board at the next meeting. How's that?
It is about time. I like it.
A strategy and perhaps some concise messaging that'll help us stay on target.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
We'll get that on the calendar.
Yeah, I do get there's the big issue in the room, but this is the largest political stab at us in the last year, right? These other things are through the normal process. This was out of the blue. It's unexpected. It's uncalled for given the part of the industry that we fit in, and they're using it as ammunition to prove that CCAs are deficient, right? It may be a trivial point, and we may be able to fix it, but we need to stand up and loudly call them and point out to our elected officials that the CPUC is not acting in the best interest of the citizens of California when they pull this shit to make a political, it's Cupertino, they talk like this, right?
We have many worse things to say, actually.
Okay. Sorry about that. Wow. When they do this, when they do this to make political points, this was done intentionally so that they have on record for months and years to come this point where the vast majority of CCAs failed to be in compliance for something that you consider trivial. I consider this a huge deal, and this is very much in our spaces as elected officials to be able to scream to our representatives in Sacramento that this is unfair and unjust.
And the CPUC needs reform.
And the CPUC needs to get thumped and fixed for this.
Well, and one quick note I'll add on that. This is not to downplay the importance of minimizing emissions of NOx or particulates, but it was the primary purpose of the IRP exercise, as you know, is related to GHG emissions.
What is CalCCA doing on this?
So CalCCA, they are working very actively on this. They're participating both in the proceeding at the commission and also leading the legislative advocacy work on the bills that deal with the same type of central procurement for GHG-free resources or renewable resources that the procurement track in the IRP is anticipating. So they are very much involved in this, working on both the commission and the legislative side.
Okay, great.
So if I may just add some context to this and a couple of other things. This is an energy year. We're going to have a lot on our plate. We will schedule the ad hoc legislative committee meeting so we can refine not just our messages on this issue, but a multitude of issues. And I'll also say that on Friday, the governor will be announcing his energy plan. On February 12th, he announced that it would take him 60 days for the strike team to come up with a plan. So on Friday, he's expected to announce a plan. This will be one more issue that the state will be dealing with. Obviously, fire liability will be front and center, but there are other issues on energy market structure, oversight, et cetera, that we think will be teed up. And so there are a number of things that are going to be happening in the next year, and we'll schedule something very shortly with the ad hoc Ledge Committee to strategize.
I've got one additional item that I want to talk about tonight, direct access. So as you guys all remember, SB 237 last year, goes by fast. So we have an implementation proceeding running for that at the commission. It is a very short proceeding. They did not give themselves a lot of time. They have to have a decision on implementation by June, as per law. So it's been very quick. A couple sets of comments and a workshop, all done. We're waiting for a proposed decision. But essentially, the things that we've been advocating for, we've been advocating for a sub-allocation. When you look at how the last direct access expansion was done, they took the total expansion across the state and divided it up into 3 buckets, one for each IOU. So that kind of contains the distribution around the state of where that direct access can grow. We're advocating for doing a sub-allocation within each IOU service territory to sort of put a limit on how much load can depart from any given LSE, including CCAs. To the point that we're being asked to, by policy, enter into long-term contracts. So this is something. So we're advocating for that, but then more broadly, things that increase our visibility into how this expansion is going to unroll, like getting access to the direct access waitlist, incorporating this expansion into our existing timeline that was imposed on everybody, including CCAs, through Resolution E4907 last year. So essentially, we're working to minimize the impact on the market from this direct access expansion, and we should have some more information on that by next month's meeting. So that is my agenda. Any other questions or additions?
So I'll just end the report with a couple of items. At the executive committee meeting at the end of this month, on April 26th, we'll be bringing a cost-sharing agreement between 5 CCAs, including ourselves, Peninsula, Monterey, East Bay, and San Jose. So it'll be a cost-sharing agreement that allows us to enter into joint projects. So one of the first projects that we are working on is joint procurement of resource adequacy. So it gets to the central procurement issue that we teed up earlier. So the 5 of us are going to work on that. Monica has issued an RFP along with the other power supply directors. So we should have something for you in April to exec, and then coming to the board in May. And then lastly, just going back to the video, we will send all of you a link to the video. So if you desire to post it to any website or social media, or share it with your city council, you'll be able to do that easily. Thank you.
Any other?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hillary. Thank you both. We'll move on. Yes, the anger is not towards you, Hillary. Let's move on to item 3, which is the approval of our rate schedule. And we have Don Bray, our Director of Account Services and Community Relations. Welcome, Don.
All right, good evening, directors. Tonight we are looking for a decision from you on our rate policies for 2019. I'm going to go through a brief presentation here that'll cover some important background. We'll tee up a few options that we've considered We'll talk about the recommendation from the executive committee and staff, so which option specifically we're recommending. We'll talk about next steps and then open things up for discussion. So historically, especially for those of you that are new to us here, rate making at PG&E happened on an annual cycle, and that resulted in a new set of rates being published effective January 1st of each year. And for years, this was the way it worked. It went through a process between June and December of each year, and then rates were issued as of January. But the last 2 years have not been typical. Last year was delayed by a few months, and this year things are completely off the rails. We're looking at a process from PG&E that really has no parallel. What has happened is that PG&E issued an interim update to rates in March of this year, and that interim adjustment affected generation rates, so the rates that we compete with, affected them in such a way that we've actually become more competitive. Rates that they updated went up an average of about 3% across 40 or so rate schedules. So the delta now is 9% between us and PG&E. So we're really very, very competitive at this point. PG&E's plan is to issue final rates as of July of this year, so July 1st, and they'll be updating both the rate and the PCIA, and I'll explain that in a second. Our rate is a function of both of those. We're expecting to see rates go down quite a bit in July, so we're going to have to respond to rates going down at that point. Let's see. I will move forward to describing how rates work here. Again, our rate is really a function of PG&E's generation rate and the PCIA. If you look at the bar on the furthest left, in 2018, our rate, or the rate that our customers paid, was our generation rate plus the PCIA that's established by PG&E. The difference between that combination of those two rates and PG&E's generation rate that PG&E customers pay is the discount that we provide to customers versus PG&E. And then the bars on the right just show what that looks like now. So PG&E's rate went up by another 3%, opening up that gap a little bit wider. Arguably, we've never been in a period of more uncertainty than we're in right now. There's just a lot of things going on. We're looking at a rate reduction in July. We're estimating that reduction will be about 6.5% from the rates as of March. We expect the PCIA will increase by an average of about 1.5%. That PCIA increase and the PG&E decrease are both actually less impactful to us than we thought they might be this year and that we had budgeted for. But at the same time, power supply costs have been going up by quite a bit. And as you've seen in, I think it was a board meeting or two ago when Don went through the pro forma, those two things are just about offsetting. We've seen about a $20 million increase in power supply. We're seeing about a $20 million net benefit in what we're looking at with rates. So a tricky situation there. We also have obviously the PG&E bankruptcy. We have the issues with central buyer and direct access that Hillary walked through. So we're really in a period where we need to be careful. So we laid out 4 options, and I'll walk you through these. The first option is that we don't do anything rate-wise until August 1st. Again, PG&E's rates come out July 1st. We'll see exactly what they are, and we'll make our adjustments accordingly. Per our plan for this year, we would move to a 1% discount in that rate-setting process from the 9%, formerly 6%, that we have now. So that's option A. Option B is that we would also do an interim increase, kind of like what PG&E did, and we'd mirror it. So we would raise our rates by 3% effective May 1st, making our discount 6%, what it was for all of last year. And then we would reduce those rates by 2% in August, netting a 1% discount relative to PG&E. By virtue of increasing our rate for that interim period, we would add about $3.6 million to our operating reserves. So there'd be a net positive impact to our reserve contribution. And then options C and D, I won't take as long on those, but in short, on option C, we're looking at a 6% increase in May and then a 7% decrease, resulting in a 3% discount going forward in August. And option D would be a 3% increase, 4% decrease, resulting in a 3% discount going forward. So the first two options, A and B, 1% discount going forward after August. Options C and D, 3% discount going forward after August. Option C, we've made quite a bit of money in May to August because of the significant increase of 6% over that period. So that resulted in a positive variance to the budget, and option D takes us back to zero where we are today. When we went through this with the executive committee, there was interest in a consumer reports view of this. That was a lot of numbers. Could you just reduce this to a few simple circles? So we looked at this from the perspective of rate stability, discount consistency, and incremental impact to reserves. And it's a simple scale. The dark circle just means the highest impact relative to that criteria, and the open circle means lowest. So this was generally how the scoring laid out. And of course, this is general. But in looking at this, option B really seemed to be the best overall combination of keeping rates reasonably stable, offering us a reasonable story discount consistency-wise, and producing incremental reserves. Okay. So just summarizing, option B was the recommendation of the executive committee and of staff. This would reset the SVC discount to 6% May 1st, so it's a 3% increase in our rates that we see today. And then we would lower this discount to 1% in August, and it's actually I believe a 2% reduction in rates by us, so up 3 down to a 1% discount. Option B results in a $3.6 million contribution to our reserves. It is important for us to be thinking about this in the context of the uncertainty that I mentioned earlier. It leaves us in a flexible position with a 1% discount versus a 3% discount. 1%, by the way, was our discount in our first year of operation. So the customer base has seen us do this before. And it maintains a reasonable level of overall rate stability throughout the year versus some of the other options. This is a picture of the relative impact to reserves of option B. So option B is the green view. Okay. Last comments here. As it relates to our rate setting process, if we do elect to go forward with the May 1st rate change, we'll decide that tonight. The August 1st rate change, though, we don't have a board meeting in July. So we need to think about our process for potentially pre-approving that rate increase for August. So we're going to talk about how that might work. One of the concerns the executive committee had was, what if when PG&E actually publishes their rates as of July 1st, we get some surprises? Maybe surprises that are very much in our favor. Might that have us do something different here or elect a different option? So one of the things that, the thing that we decided was that at the June board meeting, we would present some guardrails, in a sense. Whereas if PG&E's rate changes come in a favorable direction for us and it impacts our overall reserve contribution positively in a significant way, maybe we define what significant means and under what circumstances we might raise that discount going forward from 1% to, say, 2 or 3%. So we haven't defined that yet. We would define that in June, and the move to go to 1% in August would be subject to those conditions. If those conditions aren't met and we were where we think we were going to be, we would just move forward with the 1% discount effective August 1st. So the decision we're looking for tonight, or the proposed resolution here, is to direct CEO and staff to implement a 6% discount effective as of May 1, so that's a 3% increase, and then direct staff to move towards a 1% discount August 1st, subject to the guardrails that I mentioned. So that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from board members? Yes, Member Tovar.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Don. And Chris, thank you for the conversation over the phone earlier today. I had a few questions. PG&E is making this very complicated for customers. I mean, because their rate is always changing. And I understand that we want to stay competitive. But the bottom line, we're also looking at a reserve here. So currently, if you can answer a few questions, have we met our target with our reserve? If not, what was the sort of anticipated date of that? And are we planning on meeting that in addition to what is our target reserve?
So I may ask for some help from the finance chief here.
Sure.
Don, do you want to take this? Okay.
Thank you for the question, Director Tovar. Yes, so we were originally looking to hit our target. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? We were originally looking to hit our target at the end of this year, and 12 months ago, $50 million surpluses were considered in the pro forma. Things have changed quite a bit based on all the risks that Don covered earlier. So we're right now looking at hitting our target 2 years out. That target is 180 days or 6 months coverage of your operating cost budget. So we're looking for, and in context, to obtain a credit rating, somewhere in that 120 days to 150 days is recommended. We're shooting for 180 days on our reserve target. And what was the earlier first part of that question? Or
well, again, sort of current, what is our target for our reserve? Is it 50%, 75%? Yeah.
So yeah, it's 50%.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Smith? Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to make a quick note about what the executive committee spoke about. We
actually, can we just hold it to questions and then I'll go to the
sure.
public and then we'll bring it back.
Okay, sure.
Any other questions? If not, I do have a public comment card from Mr. Tulia.
Hi, good evening. James Tulia, resident of Sunnyvale. I used to work at PG&E, been in residential energy efficiency programs, and I'm again in residential energy efficiency programs. I'm usually in a home helping with energy reductions, about anywhere from 2 to 5 homes a week. So I talk to a lot of customers. So I just wanted to support the staff's recommendation for option B. It's the best balance of all the different aspects of what you want to achieve as an organization. And from the perspective of customers, you don't want them to swing too much. So dampening the effects of PG&E's wild rate swings is a good thing to the point just made. So option B is the best balance of all three and is very prudent relative to building a little bit more on the reserves due to all the risk. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? If not, I'm going to close public comment. Actually, Vice Chair had a request to speak, so I'm going to go to you, and then we'll go back.
We're probably going to talk to the same thing from two sides. So just a little bit of context. When we look at the reserves, I worry sometimes that we're trying to drive the car by the gas gauge. The reserves obviously matter tremendously to mitigate risk. But I got to point out the obvious. I've invested in energy stuff for over 20 years, and we have staff who've had to live and breathe it from a procurement side and a management side. You guys ain't seen nothing yet, right? The volatility and the risk is just enormous in this space. The chart that we saw in the previous presentation on natural gas prices, to me that means there's a lot of money to be made, but if you're looking out for the citizens and consumer, there's a lot of fiscal impact on people. This market is crazy and it is nuts. And we talk about risk and we talk about $3.8 million, and I've said it jokingly, but it's actually very serious. We can lose $3.8 million in one day as energy prices swing and swing against us. We can make $3.8 million in one day too, I should point out. And so as an organization, we have to sort of step back and think about what is the steady rudder that we can put into this ocean of uncertainty. And we came up with a reserve policy that has an upper and a lower limit. We have a goal of 180 days. I want to take a second. We should all pat ourselves on the back. We did achieve, in less than 2 years of operation, we did achieve the bottom level of our reserve goals, and that is more than some of the longer standing CCAs even have. So we've got ourselves into a very fiscally stable spot. We all agree we'd like to be at the 180 days because we've really pressed staff hard on wanting to get a good credit rating. Let me rephrase that. An exceptional credit rating, better than any of the other CCAs, and staff is rising to that challenge. So for purposes of credit rating, which will help our procurement, for purposes of stability to a certain amount of uncertainty that we all know is going on. And again, I don't see this year as any worse than any other year. We're just more aware of it now as elected officials, having lived through a couple of years of this. But there's always nutsy stuff going on. And these energy markets and the regulatory markets and our friends in Sacramento don't always move in ways that are in our best interest. And when you're dancing with the elephants, my daughter is a zookeeper. She works with lions and tigers and bears because they are safer than working with elephants. Because an elephant, thank you, Rod, for being the straight man. An elephant can step on you and put you out of existence without you even knowing it. And I feel like that's what's happening with like the direct access maneuver that just happened in Sacramento to us. They made a maneuver for other reasons. They didn't realize they could be threatening our very existence, and we're leading the cause on getting to a carbon-free California. We are leading, we are showing how to do what they need. Anyway, that was my big picture context. There's a lot of uncertainty. The reserves matter for a reason. The rate stability back to our customers, and our stated goal of being 100% carbon-free at a rate less than PG&E. As we went through this in the executive committee, and I'm going to pass to Nancy because she'll give you more context, we landed at a spot where what was the sweet spot out of all the millions of options? Let's get back to just 1% under PG&E so we meet that goal. Let's stay carbon free and let's pile up as much money as we can possibly get. And you see the charts, $3.8 million is not going to make a big difference, but it is the most prudent and safest thing to do at this juncture. And so that's why we landed at that particular option. Nobody up here should be complacent. It's either kill or be killed. And if we are ever sitting on our laurels, we're in trouble. Oh no, I'm not kidding. I mean, this market, everything changes so fast, and the CPUC are not our friends, and our state legislature is not sitting in our seats. This is a very, very, very challenging space that we've all signed up to be in. And our existence is not a certainty, it's not a guarantee, it's not a given. And so the most prudent thing that we can do is draw in the sails, get ourselves to that 1% under again, and continue to just bust our you-know-whats, I won't say it even here in Cupertino, to make sure that we can keep changing the world. And those were my comments. Nancy probably has a more elegant way to phrase it.
Well, thanks for setting me up for success there.
Oh, I have such faith in you. It's going to be great.
Just don't talk about elephants.
I'll just say that I know my way to Sacramento and to Washington now, so that's all I'll say in response to your very impassioned comments. I'm going to bring it back a little bit more to the process, and that just to point out that the materials that the executive committee considered are public materials, and picture, if you will, some of these charts with nothing but numbers instead of percent changes. And so we got kind of more of a raw look at these options, and we spent a fair amount of time going through the options and deliberating what would be the best ones for the organization, the best ones for the uncertainty that we're facing in terms of what the rates will be, especially since we won't be having a board meeting during the time that they'll be changing. So so to the point of if you want the details, they are available in the staff report and in the materials presented to the executive committee. So you can thank us for, I like the chart that compares the rate alternatives of the Consumer Reports model, because I think it shows very clearly that people like Howard, who are really focused on the building the reserves, it shows very clearly that that option B is the best option. And when people like my constituent James come and speak, as he did at the executive committee, he had a lot more colorful depiction of what it's like to go to somebody's house and hear them complain about changes to the rates. So for those of us who are concerned about the customer perception of what SVCE is doing, option B also clearly stood out as the best choice. And so for those reasons, we asked staff to present it to you in this manner. And we also wanted to mitigate the risks of unpredicted change. And that's why we will be considering the quote unquote guardrail option later in June. So that's.
So all the points that have been made are brilliant, and Howard, you're very eloquent on this, and I appreciate it. And we need to get you to Sacramento, man. And you. And all of us. I'll simply, so I'm very supportive of this as well as a dampened choice, but a responsible choice. And you know, Fred, a little color on our reserves. When we started 2 years ago, we had figured by this year we would have our reserves at 180 days, right? Now, as you can see, we're not going to get there for another couple years, perhaps. Why is that? What happened? Well, external variables come into play. It wasn't PG&E. It's not like their rates dropped a lot. It's that the PCIA went up a lot. The CPUC took it out of us, and then, you know, we looked at some of the silly things going on with RA and our inability to have that released efficiently from PG&E. So for a variety of reasons, not under our control, right? We're seeing $20 million swings here and there. So building our reserves as we can with time, but maintaining our prime goal, which I think on the executive committee and this board, I hope, would agree that maintaining our policy of carbon-free in our base rate for a little less than PG&E, if we can do that and begin decarbonization that I found the talk so inspiring that we had earlier, I think, you know, we will fulfill our core mission. So I'll leave it at that.
Director Tovar, did you have comments?
No, and again, I appreciate the comments that were made, and I am in support of this. I just wanted to sort of get a little bit more background, and I also want to thank the committee for the recommendation, all the hard work that they put into this as well.
Director Gibbons, I see you.
I was just going to thank the executive committee for doing all of the discussion, and the staff was very thoughtful in giving us a lot more than what you're seeing here. And we've heard very eloquently why we are recommending what we are. But I'd also like to tie back to a comment that the board had a lot of choices early on in the first year and a half of how to do rates and give money back and rebates and so forth. And frankly, we had some tough discussions about how conservative we should be and how fast we needed to focus, or how much we needed to focus on the reserve. And the dynamic of that decision had no idea about the dynamic of what's actually happened. So there's been a tremendous consistency and conscious effort and support to keep the organization financially stable and clearly understand the risks. And staff has been superb at helping us recognize those and be responsive to them. So I'm very supportive of the work we've done to date and the recommendation.
Thank you, Director Corrigan.
Oh, well, yeah, first I'm in complete support and I am prepared to make a motion. I have been most inclined to support this after my conversation with Garish because I think it helps smooth what our customers' expectations are rather than seeing fluctuations, even though they may be small. I don't think anybody likes surprises. And because I'm not sure there's a better place to introduce this crazy notion, I'm going to do it right now and take a little poetic license. I know in the past we've talked about programs that we produce as an entity. I'd like to throw in another notion, if it's even feasible, that we might want to consider a program that we add to our rates that is something along the lines of add a penny for our programs, or round up your bill for in additional investment in your community, and allow SVCE to give customers the option of rounding up their bill in small incremental ways so that we can receive that income and apply it to programs, giving us even more money for operations that will help us in a multitude of other ways. That idea is not one that I dreamt up on my own. I don't want to take full credit. It actually was a notion started in a Valley Water District Board meeting this morning, but I'm going to steal it and suggest it here for some further noodling amongst smarter people than myself, and see if there's any momentum to pursue something along those lines, allowing our customers to invest in what we're doing. I'm prepared to make a motion if you'd like, Chair. Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we approve a 3% rate increase, maintaining our 6% decrease below PG&E through August, and that we will review in June if we have the PCIA numbers from PG&E for August's step up. Or are we making it all, you want it all in one motion today to approve August 2?
No, you're better off going by the staff report, because they've put both items in there in a way that's a little bit clearer.
Yeah, so the easiest action would be to adopt the resolution, which is resolution number 2019-06.
Perfect.
And I'll take care of it.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Does this need to be roll call vote or just an
voice vote is fine.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other discussion? If not, motion to approve by Member Corrigan, second by Member Tovar. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. We'll move on to item 4, which is an approval of the Q1 2019 update of our decarbonization strategy and programs roadmap. And we have our Director of Decarbonization and Grid Innovation Programs, Amy Bailey. Welcome.
Did I hear earlier that she's the smartest director of decarb programs in the state? Is that what I heard?
No pressure, Amy.
Nope, yeah. Way to build up expectations, Panama. Okay, so thank you very much, directors, for the opportunity to speak. This is the first, actually, quarterly update for the Decarb Strategy and Programs Roadmap. And this presentation has two different parts. The first part focusing on the quarterly update, and then we've also tacked on a second item, specifically a request for an additional program area that we've seen a need for and would like your input and guidance on. So for the quarterly program update, if you recall back in December, as a part of the Decarb Strategy and Programs Roadmap, we proposed a specific policy for reporting and review, specifically to provide a quarterly report to the board and then carry out a roughly annual review process where we'd carry out stakeholder engagement to review the entire portfolio and progress towards meeting our GHG goals. So this is the first quarterly update that covers January through March of this year. So the high-level message is that the roadmap development, or implementation rather, is proceeding on schedule and on budget. We can go into some more detail about that, specifically the documents that are in the board packet. I wanted to highlight what they are and kind of how we structured it that way. So there are three distinct parts that I'd like to point out. First is attachment 1. And so this is kind of the official quarterly report. It includes bulleted highlights, a timeline, a summary timeline chart, a summary budget chart, and then also a table that goes through program by program, what have been the major milestones from the past quarter and kind of what's the outlook going forward. Second, for those that are looking for more detail that's in that attachment, we also wanted to provide revised program briefs. And so these program briefs are the 2 to 3 page more detailed descriptions of the program approach. And so those are included as attachment 2. And then a third document that I wanted to highlight, which we do not have at this point, but it's mentioned here in the third bullet, is a kind of PR version of the quarterly update. And so this is intended to be a jazzy, engaging one-pager that's intended more for the general public. And so we saw a need for this, certainly from conversations with board members and at a staff level. So this is intended to be something we can go to our customers with, constituents with, other elected officials, state agencies, et cetera. So we unfortunately don't have that tonight, but that's forthcoming. And so we tried to take an onion approach where there were different layers of detail. For those just wanting the highest level of detail, probably the one-pager is sufficient. A bit more detail, they can look at attachment 1, and then attachment 2 has a greater amount of detail. But this is the first time we're doing this, so we welcome any feedback that you all have on these 3 documents. Like, do they give you kind of the information you need? Is there information that you're seeking that's not in there that should be? Are there better ways to communicate what we're doing? Any sort of feedback you have, we can help make improvements for certainly the next quarter, or if needed on an interim basis. And so I will go through in a bit more detail, so maybe 5 to 10 minutes, some updates on the program areas. So we thought it might be best, given that we do have some more board members, and since this is the first time. So this is just a summary timeline of the program's portfolio. So we're focused on Q1. You can see from the color coding there were a number of different programs that are in development now, and some that have actually already launched. And so we'll go through them by program area. So the first program area is power supply. And the priority program is C&I clean power offerings. And that's to develop, market, and sell additional SVCE power offerings for our C&I customers. And so the goal of this program really is customer retention, but I think more than that, it's retention or preservation of the GHG emissions reductions that we've been able to achieve by launching SVCE. And so we're on track to launch pilot offerings to our C&I customers in Q4 of this year. Okay, so for the next program area, the built environment, so you've already had a lot of information about the built environment from Panama and his inspiring talk this evening. So I'll try to be brief here. So buildings in our service territory are responsible for around 1/3 of our emissions, and we have a lot of work to do to decarbonize them. And so we have 3 program areas, and the focus is largely new construction. So the first program area is working with our member agencies and developing really forward-thinking building electrification and EV charging infrastructure codes for adoption in the next building code cycle. And so we partnered with PCE. We went through a competitive solicitation process to hire a technical consultant and then launched this effort back in January. And we've carried out several member agency meetings and held kickoff workshops with broader stakeholder groups. And we'll actually be unveiling the draft model codes tomorrow. So over the coming few months, it's going to be a big effort. Educating and engaging different stakeholder groups. We have a fairly extensive stakeholder engagement plan, and we'll be soliciting feedback and making revisions to that model code. But the kind of bottom line is that we're on track for to support our member agencies in bringing those codes to their councils in Q3 of this year. And then there are 2 other programs in the built environment that kind of round out what we're doing there, specifically our heat pump water heater program, co-funded by the Air District, and then also our all-electric showcase grants program. And so in one of Panama's slides, he highlighted a SMUD program to provide incentives for all-electric new construction. So we've been having a number of conversations with them. This program is taking kind of lessons learned from their program, basically. And so those are on track to launch in June and July of this year. Okay, so for the next program area, mobility, transportation is responsible for half of our community emissions. So it's a very key sector for us to tackle in order to achieve climate goals. And the first program out the gate really is working with our member agency staff on the development of an EV infrastructure strategy and plan. And so there's a nice highlight in attachment 1 that kind of describes where we are. With that, we've contracted with E-Mobility Group. We've formed a 2-county regional coalition in part to get state funding from the CEC, and we've also formed an EV working group, all to provide input on that plan. And the plan is to have that in place within the coming couple months. And so given the board recess in July, it will end up coming to you in August. We'll have a presentation on what the outcomes are. And then for the second program, EVSC incentives, so that stakeholder engagement, a part of the stakeholder engagement process is specifically targeting feedback to prioritize EV charging infrastructure programs and understanding what design elements to incorporate into that second program. And so they're kind of staggered in the release. All right, so to achieve climate goals, it's not enough to decarbonize electricity and electrify everything to run off that electricity. You also have to do one more thing, which is to say harness energy efficiency and make sure all of these newly electrified loads are integrated within the larger grid. And so we have to do this to ensure that we're taking a least cost pathway to deep decarbonization. So this particular program area focuses specifically on that. And we contracted with GridWorks, which is a nonprofit kind of boutique firm that specializes in grid integration and stakeholder engagement, industry stakeholder engagement for grid integration policies and activities. And they'll be leading a very brisk stakeholder engagement process focused a bit more on industry and state policymakers that's going to be launching next week. And so by the end of Q3, we will have kind of an updated discussion paper that incorporates industry and other stakeholder feedback into what are the different options that a CCA could take, specifically SVCE, to help promote grid integration. And kind of falling out of that will be a recommendation for what program or programs to pursue. And so the expectation is we'd go out to RFP right after we have that recommendation. Okay. So education and outreach is the 5th area, and there are 2 programs. Our Customer Resource Center initiative is the first, and we plan to issue an RFI this quarter to ensure that really we understand the breadth of technologies available to help educate and engage our customers in understanding their energy usage and vehicle and building electrification opportunities. And then based on the results of that RFI, we'd go out to RFP. Then the second one is the community engagement grants, and this is a program that launched actually last year. And so these grants focus on engaging underreached customer segments, such as low income, English as a second language, et cetera. So we're gathering information through these outreach events that will really help inform program design to better serve those customer segments, in addition to the primary purpose of that program, which is outreach to those events to educate them, to those groups to educate them about energy and SVCE and what their options are to decarbonize. Okay, so the next and final program area is innovation. And this, the goal here is to really leverage our unique position as a community-owned electricity provider in the heart of Silicon Valley to support the innovation ecosystem in addressing really key technical, market, and policy barriers to achieving our climate targets. And so there are 2 programs. Innovation Partners is where we're engaging with incubators, accelerators, universities, industry research labs, and other sorts of innovation ecosystems to really raise visibility of kind of where we see the need for more innovation. And building electrification is a big area, specifically retrofitting existing buildings. And so as a part of that, we are sponsoring a couple different challenge events, the Stanford Clean Tech Challenge, which is this coming weekend. Justin and I will be there mentoring students all weekend on the challenges of building electrification retrofits. So that's the challenge area that we submitted, and we're looking forward to seeing what the students come up with as far as kind of ideas to tackle these problems. And then there's another event, the Powerhouse Sun Code Hackathon, which is next month. And so SVC is also a part of sponsoring that event. And as a sponsor for these innovation events, you again get to submit a challenge area. So we'll be deciding whether to submit the same challenge area or maybe focus on a different area. But this is really an opportunity to direct all of these great minds that we have in this area towards the needs that we see in this space that are really not represented. Okay, and then Innovation On-Ramp is the second program, which is to provide grant funding for pilot projects, innovative pilot projects with external partners. So this one was published on our website towards the end of March, and we're doing a so-called soft launch. We do anticipate having program support on board at some point in time, but the RFP for that program support is going to be issued in April. So we wanted to kind of work out the kinks of the program and not do a big press release at this point in time without having that support in place. And so we have a backlog of interest. This is a program that I think really kind of highlights our, well, where we are in the state and in Silicon Valley, and highlights kind of what sort of unique value proposition that we can add that maybe a PG&E can't add. And so we've had just a lot of interest since the adoption of the decarb roadmap. And so big list of people we've reached out to that have said they want to know when it's launched. And so we have a lot of, we expect a lot of applications, basically. Okay. So that's the summary of where we are with the programs roadmap. And there are a lot of activities in progress, but as you can tell from the colors in this chart, it's more colorful coming up. So there's a lot of work to be done, and things are going to be launched. We'll have a number of launches in the next quarter as well. So we're looking forward to that. And then there's one more part of this presentation that's quite brief. So I'll go ahead and cover the next few slides very briefly, and then open it up for questions if that works for you all. Okay. All right. So through the REACH code effort.
We have some antics going on the computers up here. Pardon us.
It keeps it lively. Children. It's a long day.
Please.
Okay, great. All right, so through the REACH code effort, we've definitely seen a need to really elevate workforce training and development to its own program area. And what was presented and adopted in December, the program's roadmap, we had kind of embedded workforce training into the different programs, but we think it kind of deserves its own place, its own program area, its own kind of earmarked budget. Since there is a lot of work that needs to be done building capacity in the marketplace to really enable this transformation that we're trying to catalyze. And there is a virtuous cycle with workforce development as well. A well-trained workforce can accelerate or will accelerate decarbonization, and decarbonization does create local workforce opportunities accessible through training. So I think the way that we're approaching the development of this program is how we approach the development of the entire roadmap and all of the programs. That is to say, first listen, engage stakeholders, do background research, and then the other two principles are ensure what we're doing is additive. It's leveraging the activities that already exist and filling in gaps where we can fill in gaps, and to be inclusive. So this is, I think, a really unique opportunity to bring other parts of the workforce and other parts of our customer base kind of into the fold. And so that's another kind of principle that we have when we're looking into what form workforce training and development program could take. So we've already started some stakeholder outreach to NOVA, community colleges, labor, and industry associations, and some of this has really been kind of sparked by the REACH code effort and the stakeholder engagement that we've started through the REACH code effort. But we're very much in the kind of framing stage. And so what we'd like from the board is certainly some direction on whether to pursue this program area or not via kind of adoption or not of this staff proposal to earmark funding. And I think in the proposal would be to continue to do research and then come back to the board with an update on like what we think would be the most effective program design for this particular area, and then launch it. So, okay, so that's it. How about I just skip to I have a couple more notes on the budget. So we included one chart on the budget. This is a summary chart. So through the organizational budgeting process, the board approved 2% of operating revenues for programs, which is the gold band at the top of the chart. So we have around 2/3 of the total program's budget for FY19 and FY20 allocated to specific program areas. And that's the color bars that you see. And of this allocated budget, we're on track to spend all of that we've requested within these fiscal years. And then the second chart just shows the same chart before, but with this particular proposal, this request for $100K in FY19 and $100K in FY20 for workforce training and development. So thanks very much for your attention, and I look forward to answering any questions you have.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Yes, Member Ellenberg.
Thank you so much for that report. I have some questions about the workforce development piece. Who is your target audience? Are you looking at community college students, four-year students, people that are already in the workforce and looking to transition?
So right now it would be all of the above. And so we've had conversations already with community colleges, and so certainly catching students when they are in the initial training phase and really preparing them for a decades-long career in building decarb. Like that would be a really, that would be an influential point to have an impact. But there are, of course, a lot of other contracts already out there working and have experience with, mixed fuel homes. And so there's some retraining as well that could happen, like with different workforce development organizations like NOVA, et cetera. And so at this point in time, everything's kind of on the table, and it's really the background research that will help us kind of prioritize. But I think if we see 2-3 different opportunities, there could also be the opportunity to split up this budget or potentially come back to you and ask for additional budget if we think that there's a need for more based on the need that we're seeing in the industry.
And what about summer internships? Is that something that would be practical here? Are there enough kind of hands-on or exposure opportunities?
Summer internships specifically for like electricians, or you mean within SVCE itself?
Whatever you're looking for in terms of workforce development. I'm thinking about ways that we all have our own social media and outreach components and can help amplify SVCE's efforts to identify workforce potential partners, and if there is an internship program or some kind of pipeline that we can hook people into, that's a very tangible way for us to support that effort.
I see, that's great. Well, we definitely have summer interns at SVCE, and I think that it's good to know that we may have some support and recruitment for that. I think for the workforce development and training program that's described here, it's a bit more focused on so-called blue collar or so-called blue-green collar, helping contractors, electricians, plumbers, et cetera, transition into more of a green collar job. But that's kind of more the target focus at this point, as opposed to working specifically within SVC.
And I have, one other question: are you connected already with? Bless you. The career tech. What is that called? The name just went out of my head. It's the Joint Powers School District on Hillsdale.
My brother teaches
SVCTE, Silicon Valley Career Technical Education. Slowly, it came, piece by piece.
I understand.
Because that's a terrific venue for getting students at the high school level on-site work. They've got labs, they've got facilities, and this might be a new opportunity if they're not already offering programs in this space. It's exactly the audience that you're talking about.
Great.
And I'm happy offline to facilitate that and talk about that more with you. Okay, thank you.
The line here, Member Sinks, Member Smith, and then Member Tovar.
So can you remind us again what a virtual power plant is?
Yeah, I think I did skip that.
I know I knew once.
So a virtual power plant is a cloud-based aggregation of distributed resources that are being controlled at the same time to ramp up and ramp down. And the idea is that, let's just say you have 5 different battery storage installations at different C&I customers. If you discharge them at the same time and ramp them up, it's kind of equivalent to a power plant ramping up that amount. So that's where the terminology of virtual power plant.
It's like distributed generation or perhaps demand, but the idea that you could control this as a power plant of a lot of small things.
Exactly.
Small generators, okay. I am very impressed that we're going to get reach code model language out tomorrow. I was, frankly, maybe a little skeptical in the beginning that we were going to be able to do this work so quickly, but can you remind us of if we miss this cycle on reach codes, what's the next big update?
So the building code is a 3-year code, and so then the next statewide building code update will be 3 years from the coming January. However, you don't have to adopt.
It could be off cycle.
It can be off cycle.
It's just that frankly, for all the folks that have to pay attention to these things, we know we have their attention once every 3 years because they're having to adopt changes from the state. So that's why this was so key. So I'd like to show appreciation for your getting this done and giving our staffs plenty of time to think through it with our planning departments. I think it's really important. I'd asked that the presentation earlier by Panama be recorded. I think for all of our fellow council members, or even us that couldn't make it, and those staffs, if, you know, anybody having half an hour, 45 minutes to look at that video, I think will be highly motivated to really take this effort seriously. So I really appreciate staff's work in bringing our speaker in this evening, as well as your work.
Could I maybe mention one thing just for the REACH Code effort? I mean, it's certainly an all hands on deck project, a very big effort, but it's being led by John Supp. So definitely wanted to acknowledge him. I think he's here. Oh, he's working on it. The webinar's tomorrow morning, so that's symptomatic of the dedication. Yeah, so he's been the fearless leader in.
And now a question.
Oh.
Well, a comment followed by a question. So I do appreciate that we're engaged with Stanford, and I think I'm very happy to see on the innovation front that we're beginning to get hooked up with the academic community. You know, in my attendance at the Stanford Summit in June, the Energy Summit, and, you know, different meetings hosted by E3 and Stanford and all, right? The dominant players in this business have more than enough mind share, and we need to get some of it. So my question then is, the energy, as much as I very much appreciate Stanford and your engagement with them, and they're in our county, the Energy Institute at Haas, at Cal, is very influential in state policy. Severin Borenstein and others. Are we engaged with them in some way, I'm hoping, or can we be?
Yes, we are, and the reason I laughed is Amy goes to school at Berkeley now. She's getting her MBA. She knows Severin and that entire group very well.
Who's just joined the Cal ISO board, right?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And so we have actually had a meeting. Both Don Bray and Amy went up, met with Severin and all his researchers, talking about our portfolio and what we want to do. So I think we're making small inroads, and maybe you want to add anything to that?
So the annual conference, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the Power Conference, so SVC did sponsor that this year. So that was...
Oh, you did? Okay.
We did. I think there were 2 CCAs. East Bay sponsored it as well, but we were the other ones. So that took place, I think, a few weeks ago. And in addition to that opportunity, we have had conversations specifically with Severin Borenstein on rate design. It's naturally a very important area for him, through kind of the C&I clean power offerings discussions, and bounced around some ideas for different pilot rate designs. And so whether it's through either the C&I clean power offerings or maybe through Innovation On-Ramp as a pilot program, we'd love to continue to engage with him and the rest of the Energy Institute group on any particular opportunities as they arise. I think it's a bit opportunistic at this point, given he's quite busy right now, but we're certainly looking to try to build.
That was a wonderful answer. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Director Smith.
Shifting gears considerably, you mentioned, I think, something about the cadence of these reports. So this is the first quarterly update. So in the next quarter, I wanted to clarify that the peel the onion approach a little bit more. Okay. So you have provided tonight a summary that I counted 6 pages. You provided a set of revised program briefs, which was very interesting to go through. That's approximately, if we add the new one, it would be about 39 pages. And then there is a data sheet coming. So
Right.
my question is, in approximately 3 months at our next board meeting, which will be, isn't that July? It'll be August, because we'll miss July. So are we going to look forward to this level of comprehensive updates and progress every quarter?
I think the bulk of that really is the program briefs. And although, it is a number of pages, you'll notice most of those were created for the December meeting, and what's shown are red lines for revisions. And so the actual revisions, that there were only a few, I think, that were revised significantly, and they weren't like substantive revisions. It was more providing an update. Yeah, we hired this consultant. The timeline is still consistent. We have these partners in place now, things like that. So I think it's really the 6 or 7 page attachment 1 update that's new content. Although the highlights in the beginning part, some of that was drawn from our just general communications and outreach, and the 1 page kind of PR version would be drawing on attachment 1. That is all to say, I think, I'm not going to say it wasn't staff work, because it was, because it was work from across the organization, but maybe the page length based on attachment 2 isn't quite reflective of the work. So I think we're comfortable with this level of update. If you want less information, we could give you less information, or if you want us to change the type of information we're giving you, I think we'd be very receptive to understanding what would be the most useful.
I think I appreciate the level of especially as we're launching, it's especially nice to get all the detail. So we'll play it by ear, but I'm not complaining. I think it's a good level. And of course, we're looking forward to seeing the whatever you call it, the 1 pager. I'd call it a data sheet, but it'll fit on one side.
I think it's 1 page front and back.
Okay.
You want a super miracle.
So
you like the Consumer Reports
and then there's going to be the wallet version, so that the board members can go see my agency. So we're all looking forward to seeing that when it comes out, and I mean the other board members can speak to it, but I appreciate the level of detail. I guess the one question I have is that, so you printed a whole bunch of you bound together all the program books into one, like, booklet.
Mm-hmm.
And are you going to be updating those every quarter or once a year, or?
I imagine that you're talking about kind of the beautiful, stylized, glossy page roadmap. I imagine once we do the 1-year update, then maybe every single year we'd provide a revised version. That one, the intent wasn't to do that every quarter.
Okay, so it'll be more like a program yearbook or something like that. Yeah. We can all sign our pictures. So.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's enough. But I appreciate the level of detail, and that's a great report. And despite, I think when you were transitioning, we were being a little silly, but that doesn't mean that we weren't listening and that we don't think it's awesome.
That's right. Thank you, Director Tovar.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Bailey, I had promised myself earlier that I wasn't going to say anything tonight because I wanted to get home and watch the Sharks play. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Plus, this discussion here, it's something I'm really passionate about, sort of the workforce training and development. And I'm going to share a little bit about my past, and I'm hoping that along with you and Darish, maybe you guys can come visit me at my office because I think I can help with this. I I've been in higher education for the last 25 years, spent 18 years at Stanford, and then recently joined ITU in San Jose International Technological University as a director of business development and community college partnerships. And I'm going to host a group of up to 300 community college students at the end of the month for a leadership conference. So there might be a connection here. In addition to where we offer master and PhD degrees in STEM programs that may be useful as well. But I want to be able to help you with sort of what you're doing here, because before City Council I spent 4 years on the college board and 8 years on the K-12 board. So my whole life's been around education, and this is something I'm really passionate about. And I love what you guys are doing. I really, truly do, and I think it's something that's it's needed, and I would love, along I'm sure with other directors as well, to help out in any way possible, but also give you some exposure and sort of open some doors for you as well. Okay, thank you.
That'd be fantastic.
All right, Director Corrigan.
Speaking of the Sharks, thank you, Amy. Great report. I'm out of here. I completely support this program, and I'm sorry to leave early, but second period's about to begin. And I am so proud of the work you're doing. So congratulations to you and the rest of my directors. I hope you will support this.
Go Sharks. Go Sharks.
Thank you, Director Corrigan, for staying. I'm going to move to public comment, and then we'll bring it back. So, Mr. Tulea.
Hi, James Tulea, resident of Sunnyvale. There's a lot here. I'm just going to make some real quick comments about a few topics. Overall, I strongly support the staff recommendation, and especially the workforce development and training. As I mentioned before, I used to work at PG&E, and in the efficiency programs, there was always a workforce education and training. Same deal, and it had its own budget, its own thing. It's so important for bringing the workforce along, and it's the targets that were mentioned, both bringing new students up and into the right fields, as well as those who are already there, because they're the ones that are talking to the customers all the time. Residential customers are not generally well informed, and they're looking for people to guide them. So being able to help the workforce in our area guide the customers better is critical. And another angle on it is the fact that many of these contractors are part of larger organizations that have a lot of sway and influence, not only with the legislature, but with the CPUC. We went so far as to create a whole Western HVAC Performance Alliance so that we could have everybody work together and get input, and I was the chair of that for about two and a half years for all the HVAC stuff. So it's critical to bring them into the fold, and I think this actually just starts the process, and I would anticipate you're going to want to come back for more budget to do more things, because this is such a critical piece in the middle of everything. And I appreciate very much all the REACH code efforts. It's so important to catch this 3-year cycle. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? If not, I'll bring it back to the board. Any other comments? Yes, Member Gibbons.
Thank you. I'll try to take these off. So I do not mean this to be controversial. I think it's an important discussion about what SVCE is all about, and that is changing the thought process of what decarbonization is and working to do a decarbonization environments with buildings in particular. And the discussion of the workforce is really rings very true with me, because a topic that we're all dealing with is housing. And there's legislation that says that housing has to have solar on all new housing going forward. We need to have people trained for that. People need to understand how that solar is going to impact the electrical use of the building and how much solar to put on them to affect the electrical use in the building. And Panama's presentation, I thought, just brought it home so incredibly. We worry so much about the cost of housing. He said 20% of people's budgets pay their utility bills, and we could reduce those utility bills substantively And they are the primary source of payday loans to pay utility bills. And then you look at jobs. So I'm just saying that single source solutions, they're great, but they need to blend together. We need to talk about housing. We need to talk about energy. We need to talk about jobs. And all of that needs to come together. And I think what we're doing here and in these programs across the board, the EVs, all of those are going to make living here more cost effective and provide jobs and good salaries for all the people who work here, because the salary differential is, again, no minor aspect of why it's costly to live here. So as we go through these programs and some of the points that you are all bringing up, I'd like to ask us all to think multidimensionally and not piecemeal, because it is a puzzle. My favorite phrase, it's everything, it's a puzzle, and it's a Rubik's Cube of puzzles. And I think what we're doing here is so extraordinary, and I want to encourage us to talk with our councils and our legislators to understand what this kind of program can do for our state and our housing.
Thank you. Any other comments? I just will add then my sincere thanks. I'm just thoroughly impressed by how well thought out our strategy is and how it's being unveiled. You know, especially thank you on the REACH codes. I'm excited that it's coming out tomorrow. As most of you know, Mountain View did sign up to engage in that, and so I think we'll be on. I was worried about the timing and whether we would be able to have the resources to do it, even at our mostly at our city level, but with your assistance and direction, I think we're going to get there. So I'm really excited about that. And then I really want to thank staff and Girish for taking the workforce issue seriously. This was something that I guess last year when we started to get some pushback at the state level from the legislature, I started to do a little bit of digging around and asking around about what's the rub with CCAs, and as Mr. Talea mentioned, there are organizations that it comes down to jobs and job creation, job loss, and so I feel very strongly that that's important for us to engage and to be inclusive. And really, I think the focus that I was really looking at was retraining for potential as the industry moves and changes, to be able to bring folks along and working families, workers along in that. So I think it is important, and it makes sense for us to carve it out into a separate bucket. And so I'm really excited about that. So thank you for taking that seriously. Yes, Mr. CEO.
Sorry, closing comment. This has really been a team effort on the programs, and just the culture that you've inculcated at SVCE and that we're continuing as it's like multiple hats, and I need to recognize Hillary. She put together the workforce piece, and she's in charge of Legend Right. And she's working it from the angle that you talk about too, but this is just a really cool staff effort.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. It really is cool. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll be happy to make a motion.
Second. All right.
Would you like to know what the motion is?
Yes, please.
Oh. So I move that we accept this Decarbonization Strategy and Roadmaps Program Update and Briefs, attachments 1 and 2, that we adopt resolution number 2019-07, which is attachment 3, to approve the budget request and associated program brief, attachment 4, for workforce development and training programs totaling $200,000 for FY 19 and 20.
Second.
Great, with multiple seconds. So motion by Member Sinks, and I'm going to take the second from Member Ellenberg. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions, motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. All right, let's get us out of here before 9. We're going to go to our Executive Committee report. Vice Chair Miller.
Okay, so the biggest thing we spent most of our time was on stuff that we've already approved. So I won't go through too much of that stuff, but the rate discussion, obviously, and the timing of that. Future stakeholder and community engagement options, we looked at that. And we held a closed session regarding our office facility. Do you want the finance one while I'm here? Sure, okay, the Finance Committee has nothing to report since we haven't met since January 25th. But there'll be an upcoming meeting sometime this spring.
Great, thank you. Is there a report from the Legislative Ad Hoc Committee?
The Ledge Ad Hoc Committee has not met, and obviously we're delinquent and need to, so we'll be doing that before the next board meeting, I trust. And I'll encourage all of you, as we figure out when we can all get up to when we can make a concerted attempt to get up to Sacramento. You know, it's a great experience to go talk to our legislators and friends, and some people that are, right, we do have a lot of people that are open-minded, and so I'd encourage you all to think about joining us for that next adventure to SAC. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And there is no audit committee report. So are there any board member announcements or direction on future agenda items? Just go down. No? Oh, yes.
I would like to report that I joined the National League of Cities Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee. And one of the many things that they look at is clean energy. And we met in the National League of Cities meeting in Washington in March. And so I will pass along any updates relating to clean energy that I encounter.
Great, thank you. Did Member Bruins or Gibbons, did you have anything? I thought I saw hands.
I don't know if I'm... Okay. You know, Member Corrigan made a suggestion in terms of looking at this rounding up thing, and so I would just, I would encourage staff, you know, noodle on that one and see if there's any merit to it. So I guess I wanted to support that concept, at least saying it's noteworthy.
Yeah.
Yep. We'll bring that back to the exec committee.
Member Gibbons, did you have anything? No? Anything over here? No. Number 6.
Just very briefly, at the Air District, we recently approved a contract with Aclima to map the entire Air District. And one of the, so you saw the, in Panama's presentation, you saw the car and the mapping that was done for certain kinds of pollutants in San Francisco and Oakland. We're going to do that for the entire roughly 5-county area of the Air District. And one of those things we're going to measure is methane. So we're going to have a very much better sense of leakage and where we can make fixes. And yes, pour some more money into the ground, as he said. But, you know, a car will go down like every roadway 4 to 5 times, was it? And so we're expecting this work to be completed in the next few months. I hope that it will also inspire us to, yes, think about in our really big projects, all this housing we're building, right? Could we not plumb for gas? Could we not plumb for gas? So thank you.
Great. Thank you. I believe that concludes our meeting, so we will adjourn at 8:55. Thank you all, and have a good evening.